Hello and welcome to Life in Translation. My name is Aaron Alder. Joining me today is Dr. Alan Malby. Dr. Malby is the chair of the FIT Standards Committee. He is also a certified French to English translator with the ATA and has been working with the ASTM on translation standards for many years. And Dr. Malby is a longtime friend of mine. I was actually his research assistant back in the 90s.
Whoa, the 90s. Are you kidding me? Well, I consider that part of my success, if I have any, that you survived me being my research assistant and you're still involved in translation. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I said this to Arl too, and to others, probably Dr. Egg as well. Um, and I know you recognize this, but having my name associated with you in any way, whether it's warranted or not, gives me a certain level of credibility, and I value that and appreciate that today. So for sure, Dr. Melby has been working on a concept of labels for translation output. So, Dr. Melby, how did the concept of translation output labels originate?
Started out in 2021 for me. I mean, lots of people have been talking about labels, but for me, it was when a colleague of mine and I put together a panel discussion at the ASLING conference then, Translating on the Computer, about whether there are any use cases for raw machine translation. Is it ever appropriate? We got together some experts, had a good discussion, and they made some pretty convincing arguments that there are use cases for raw machine translation. Then I thought, well, just a minute. People need to know what they're getting, if they're getting human translation or raw machine translation. That was the beginning. Then I thought, just a minute, how are we going to get people to use these labels? And in November, December 2021, I thought, what do people already relate to? Well, consumer protection labels. What kind of labels? Consumer protection labels on food and products to know what's in it. You know, contains peanuts, contains trans fats, or has this much protein, or whatever. Everybody knows about labels on food and on products. Don't throw this electrical device in your bathtub when it's turned on. It'll electrocute you. It's not waterproof. There are all kinds of labels that people already relate to. So why not build on that? But just a minute, who's the consumer? Well, the consumer is the one who reads the translation. So we'll call that person the consumer. And then just a minute, where do they get the translation? Well, we need a very generic term for that. And so we said, let's expand the notion of publisher, not just somebody, big company that publishes books, but anybody who makes translations available to end users, consumers. They're the publisher. And then went from there.
Okay, so Dr. Melby, how is the process of labels for translation output approached?
Soon after I had the idea of building on consumer protection labels, it occurred to me that those labels are standardized. If some people, like say, the gluten-free, some people called it GF for gluten-free, and some people called it FG or FOG, fog, free of gluten.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a little confusing if everybody made their own labels.
Right.
So there has to be some kind of standardization. I thought, well, who would be able to standardize that? And I was working with the team on a new edition of the ASTM translation standard. I approached the team and they said, yeah, why not? Why not throw labels in there into the third edition? But then what labels? So we had a committee get together at an ATA conference, American Translators Association, and we brainstormed on it. And that was at a time when people were trying to push some people. We'll not mention names to protect the guilty. The people were saying, oh, raw machine translation, maybe not just as is, but we'll have a monolingual person of the target language look it over. And if there are any problems, they'll surely detect those problems. Not. So there was kind of an uproar in the translation sector at this time. And so we came up with the labels bilingually reviewed translation. You can't just look at the target text and see if there's an accuracy error, right? Or
Right.
and unedited machine translation. And so that's what got in at the last minute, got into the new edition. And then we started promoting that and explaining it, and we realized that there was a missing element. As this, then we got the Gen AI and revolution, and machine translation got really a lot better, not reliable, but a lot better. And I was working with a graduate student, Catherine Marshall, who defended her thesis, her master's thesis in May. Very, very important thesis from my perspective, analyzing ATA certification exams and comparing the output of a human translator taking the exam with raw machine translation, raw Gen AI prompted translation, and having trained ATA graders. We paid them. We got a grant to pay them to mark them, annotate them the way they would certification exams.
Were they
without
blind?
Completely blind. Yes, they did not know what they were grading. And in the past, prior to this, machine translation was so bad that it was obvious.
Yeah.
But not anymore. It's not as obvious anymore. And what was really surprising was that non-qualified translators, say especially those who failed the exam or just marginally passed, their output was not clearly distinguishable from the raw machine output.
Interesting.
I kind of went into a tizzy, like, what? and then I came out of the fog and said, well, just that a human has bilingually reviewed it is not enough. So we went from just a human's involved to a bilingual review to a qualified translator doing verifying, and we came up with verification. This was, now we're up to mostly to the present, to July of this year, when we had another ASTM meeting, big debate, came to that conclusion, survey, everybody made suggestions, and then we've been looking at this, the new labels, professionally verified translation versus unverified translation, where professionally is understood to be performed by a qualified translator. So it's obviously bilingual. But then the focus then shifted to qualified. And this has had a really positive response. We've been presented an ATA webinar on it in August. I presented it at the Machine Translation Conference in Chicago, end of September. We're getting right up to the present now. And now we're saying, well, we need to protect those labels. But what do you think about that, Aaron? What if somebody, oh, it's supposed to be me answering the questions. Now I'm interviewing you. What if somebody uses a label, the professionally verified translation, and it's garbage translation? They used a machine or a person who is clearly not qualified. What do you do about that?
Yeah, that's a problem that has to be protected in some way. Otherwise, it becomes it's not, the consumer can't rely on it and use the content appropriately. So how do
Exactly.
you do that? How do you protect it?
Well, we expect people to treat us translators as professionals.
Yes.
So I went to a professional in the area of intellectual property rights and consulted, actually my patent and trademark attorney I've used for years. And he analyzed, he went back and forth and asked the right questions and said, I think you need a certification mark, which is a very specialized kind of trademark that you don't put on your own products. You set up the rules on third parties, how they can use it. And so then we paid for a search, proper search. You can do your own little searches, but you need a professional again to tell whether the label that you're trying to protect is likely to be accepted by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And just about the time of the ASTM meeting about a week ago in Portland, Oregon, we the second of the year, we got the letter back. Sorry, Charlie, you are not going to be able to protect the letter sequence PVT. It's got to be more distinctive. There are lots of organizations that have protected that, and some of them that are vaguely in the area of translation, especially some firm in Denmark I'd never heard of. Said, So we had a big brainstorming session, and they're in Portland, and it was really a lively and productive session. And somebody came up with the idea of putting a Q on the end to emphasize qualified. Now we can still talk about professionally verified translation, but when you actually want to mark, it's called a word mark. It's this protected sequence of letters in a sector. Well, then we'll make it PVTQ. And preliminary searches of that have come up very likely that you can get this. And so just a few days ago, the application was submitted to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for PTQ, PVP. Oh my goodness, PVTQ. I hope you can edit out that stuttering, and or not. That's fine. That's me. And then we'll see. In the meantime, we're just going to go ahead because it looks really good.
Well, I have some questions that come up, and I don't know if it's the right time to ask them now. But if once those logos are trademarked and they're used, does that set up the user, I guess, I don't know, other than the agency or the translator, up for, does that subject them to some sort of liability if there's an error in the translation, or does it just mean that a professional has verified the text?
Well, in this age, in the age of artificial intelligence, I think we need to distinguish ourselves from the machine, which at some recent conferences I've been to where they're talking about it, they say, well, that's one of the characteristics of the AI systems. They don't feel accountable. They don't
Right.
feel anything.
Right, they don't.
We do need to take some responsibility, but it also, you can say, well, if you don't want to take the responsibility, you can use UVT, unverified translation, say,
Yeah.
or unverified. I'm not qualified according to the criteria and the standards, but I still take accountability. Well, being accountable for your work, is that a bad thing?
It's not until you're sued for $1 million, I suppose, but which, I don't know how often that happens. It's never happened to me, fortunately, but I could see where that might be a risk, but also an opportunity for professionals to step up their game, I guess.
I think so. Really distinguish yourself from the machines. We'll need to actually get somebody to get the ball rolling and start using these. So I'm embarking on Tuesday as my departure day on a European labels tour.
Nice. I actually could have used one today. I could have used UVT today. We have one client in particular who does market research. And if you've ever, if especially at this time of year with the elections, if you saw some polls, there's a good chance that the company that did those polls was our client. And they had a rush project where they didn't have time to have a human uh, verify the translation. And of course, we explained the risk to them, but I also we could have added that label.
Exactly. And that is the other side of liability. That would reduce their liability
Exactly. Yeah.
the more they become recognized. So the labels tour, it's not a rock group, but it is it's going to be an adventure.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
label,
Maybe you should team up with you two or Coldplay or who's popular in Europe. I
well,
don't know, but
actually, I got a recommendation when I was in Portland last week. I should get a photo of my uh, deceased uncle. May he rest in peace.
oh,
Wild,
Wild
Wild,
Bill.
Wild Bill Melby. Who's that?
Well,
But
that's
anyway,
yeah.
my uncle was a professional wrestler before things got really, really weird.
He was before the weirdness of professional wrestling that we have today.
Exactly. So I'm going to start out at the ASLIN conference in Luxembourg, the translating and the computer series, and I'm there just to talk to people.
What are your challenges there? I mean, how do just to talk? Are you trying to convince anybody, or are you just trying to
Oh yeah,
concept, or what
try
are
to
you trying to
convince
do?
them to start using the labels. Um, I one of the challenges is some of the institutions, European institutions. I was just talking with a colleague about this today. They put out legislation in multiple languages, and they don't call them translations. They say that every language text is on an equal basis with every other language. And so we're probably not going to get them to use PVTQ, but that's okay because this is just a minuscule part of the whole world of translation.
Yeah.
And I've I just this morning I got an appointment with the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg. Well, I'm there to talk with them about make a presentation about labels and see if they'll start using them. I'm interacting with UNESCO in Paris because that would be my next stop from Luxembourg, and they're considering whether they'll meet with me. I already approached the Fundamental Rights Agency in
Mhm.
Vienna,
Yeah.
and they politely declined. They said, "We've got other fundamental rights we're defending right now." I said, "It's a fundamental right to know what kind of translation you're consuming."
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen this tour, but we'll. I'm also. Oh, I found out at the language technology division dinner. It's claimed, alleged, that Springer, big academic publisher in Germany, is translating books and chapters with machine translation and probably not using qualified translators to verify it.
Oh, interesting.
And so I'm trying to get a contact there. Somebody's working on that for me, somebody in Germany. And then I'll end up, of course, in Budapest for the Fit Europe conference. I've been invited as I'm also the chair of Fit North America. And the chair of Fit Europe, John O'Shea, has invited me to speak at the Fit Europe conference in Budapest at the end of this month on, you guessed it, labels.
Do we want to talk at all about generative AI?
For me, the bottom line is that I believe in the profession and humans. And I don't think we're anywhere close to AGI, artificial general intelligence. And I think that human translation will be around for a long time. And especially the combination of producing it in some use cases, post editing, machine translation in some cases, and revising, which is going to go on for a long time.
Yeah.
One human revising the translation of another.
Yeah.
And I think all three of those, which we're putting under this rubric of verification by a qualified translator, I think this is going to be around for a long time. As a matter of fact, I'll predict it right now. At least 10 years, and then I'll make another prediction of how much further. How's that?
Okay. And you know what? That's a great ending, because normally these little podcasts that I do, I ask you what's your hot take, and that's it right there. Just what you gave. So
In other words, bottom line, it's worth labeling. The labeling is doing a real service to consumers. This is something that I believe is a service that, and everyone wins.
When you introduced it to me, it's almost one of those, well, yeah, why haven't we been doing this already?
Exactly. That's a good thing. A
Right.
really good idea should be one of those like, duh, why aren't we doing it already?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
That's my pitch to the translation developers. And they'll be there at the conference. So, hey, it's an adventure. And then I get home. I got to get home by December 1st. How does that sound for a label store?
Oh man. Yeah, you're going to be running around Europe. Nothing new there, probably. Well, not
Hey,
probably.
there'll be, yes, let's do another podcast update after I get back if I survive.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's do that.